You can say, but I wanted a little bit of democracy. I wanted one voter at the back to speak again, because he was the person who challenged him. Yes, I'll come to
my
you.
question basically asks why the United Nations should have any credibility if their resolutions are ignored. Now, here is a resolution that has been going for 10 years that we should be allowed to inspect. They obviously started an aggression. They lost. They agreed to these demands. And now they ignore them, okay? So we now go back to the United Nations and we say, this is an issue for us. Why should we take this institution seriously if Iraq doesn't take it seriously?
Yeah, I think sadly that not much of the world is taking it seriously, and that's the problem. It's not just the U.S., and it's not just Israel. It's not just Iraq. I mean, I mean, do we want to have a United Nations? I mean, in America, we don't even believe we should pay our dues to it. So it's
You rejoined UNESCO today, having been out of it for 20 years.
It's nothing like arriving with a check in hand to get them to do what you want.
New York. I don't know why you say the United States doesn't want to pay its dues. The United States has the United Nations in New York. We subsidize it greatly in the city.
And
if the United Nations is such a credible institution, then it doesn't need the United States.
Okay, Ed Koch.
Why does it stand without us?
Ed Koch, you want to answer that point?
There's no question, by everyone's agreement, that Iraq now has 2 weapons of mass destruction, poison gas and biological. And the question is, when will it have a nuclear capability? If it can manufacture its own fissionable material, it'll be in a few months. If it requires that they get it elsewhere, and they will get it elsewhere because it's available for purchase elsewhere, then it can take anywhere from 2 years to 10 years. Do we have to wait until they actually use the nuclear bomb on us? They, in fact, use the gas. They use the biological weapons. Why do you think they won't use the nuclear weapon if they have it?
And the nexus with the terrorism is this. Because Al-Qaeda has declared war on us and whoever else involved in those cells, that is a group out there that will use any weapon it can get a hold of to attack people in the United States and to kill Americans and to kill Jews, and as they have said they want to do. So if there is a regime with a Saddam Hussein who has these weapons, and there are groups out there, cells across the world, who want those kinds of weapons, that is the link, and that's why we must eliminate those weapons.
Okay, the man in the blue shirt, the second row from the back there.
Okay, why do we, America, get to keep our nuclear weapons even though we've used them on Japanese and we never know we might use them on Arabs next? Why do we? Why do we get to keep nuclear weapons when we've used them on Japanese and might use them on Arabs next, and other people might not?
Because the world in treaty relationships has established who in fact can have them, like Russia, like the United States. And there are countries that have violated a treaty that they signed, like India and Pakistan, by developing them. Now, you may like the perfect world with the United States weaponless under these circumstances. Not me, brother.
Nuclear weaponless, I think you mean. Okay, hold on. I don't want to go down that road any further because I want to go on. We've been on one question for a long time. A question from Chloe Matthews, please. Chloe Matthews.
If George Bush's main objective is to overturn Saddam Hussein and install a new leader, why is his solution to bomb the voters?
If his main objective is to overturn Saddam Hussein, George Bush, and install a new leader, why is his solution to bomb the voters? Jeff Hoon.
Well, he doesn't.
Iraqi voters.
Iraqi voters. Well, the main objective, let's be clear, is to rid the world of a threat from Saddam Hussein's possession of weapons of mass destruction. As has been already said, a man who has used those weapons against his own people. Now, if you're talking about the efforts that the United States and the United Kingdom make over the no-fly zones in Iraq, our pilots are there risking their lives to protect Iraqi people from attacks from their own government, from the regime in Baghdad. They are there, and when they come under attack, they are perfectly entitled to defend themselves. And that is why, from time to time, it is necessary to bomb military facilities in Iraq, to bomb radars, to bomb missiles that are targeting those aircraft. Because otherwise,
water treatment plants,
let me make it absolutely clear. I am responsible for the activities of those pilots and those aircrew over those no-fly zones. And I assure you, they only target those elements of the Iraqi machine that are targeting, attacking them.
The collateral damage? How about that?
Hamza Yusuf, do you want to answer?
An enormous amount of effort is made to ensure that there are no civilian casualties, and if there is any doubt about a risk to civilians, those missions are not authorized, and I guarantee you that they are very seriously looked at every single time there is a mission involving British aircraft.
Hamza Yusuf,
do you know how many children in Iraq have died during these sanctions and the bombing? The UN statistics,
I wanted to ask
500,000
I want to ask Hamza Yusuf to answer this.
Well, I feel, unfortunately, that we're not looking in terms of long-term. We're dealing with a very complicated area, and we're looking at it very simplistically. The Arab world is a world that feels united in the sense that they have an ethnic and linguistic bond. Anything that happens in Iraq affects the entire region. I visited Kuwait 2 years ago, and the Kuwaitis of all the Arabs have been criticized for having a deep love for the American people. I went back about 6 months ago, and I was shocked to see the same people had really felt that they'd been completely betrayed. And I think that that overwhelming feeling that will permeate the Arab world will create much more insecurity in our world and allow for much more opportunity to attack this country. And that's why I personally feel that we can't, there is going to be a straw that breaks the camel's back eventually.
Can I give Michael as well some facts about child mortality in Iraq? Child mortality since the Gulf War in those areas of Iraq controlled by the regime has doubled. In those areas not controlled by the regime, child mortality is actually falling. One of the reasons for that is that some $3 billion worth of money that is available to the Iraqi regime to spend on medicines, on help for people in Iraq, not actually spent. That money instead goes on buying weapons. Moreover, Iraq has very recently been shown to be exporting baby milk. Now, why is Iraq making money out of exploiting its own people, allowing its own children to die, simply to sustain an evil regime? That's what's going on in Iraq.
That's because Michael
they want to kill
criticized
their own children.
The woman in the third row there. You, man.
What is happening?
Go on.
My question is what you see, what you envision as a successor regime in Iraq. Like, if you do get rid of Saddam Hussein, what do you want there? Do you want a stable democratic regime, or are you going to put in someone else who's also another military, perhaps dictator, who's just more sympathetic with the U.S.?
Well, a year on in Afghanistan, we are helping a transitional government there rebuild their country. No one pretends that that can be done overnight. No one pretends in Iraq that suddenly there will be a democratic country. But you imagine the difference a year on. A year ago, a Taliban regime were abusing human rights in Iraq, in Afghanistan, were allowing the country to be used as a haven for terrorists. Now we have the prospect of a country that is being rebuilt, that the government is struggling with many of the problems that they have to face, but one day, yes, there can be democratic elections in Afghanistan, and I see no reason why Iraq, reincorporated into the international community itself, could not have a democratic government.
Perhaps we could install an oil company executive in Iraq like we did in Afghanistan as the president.
The man in the open neck shirt there, you, sir, in the second row, yes. No, not you, spoken already, yes, you, sir.
I just want to ask Jeff Hoon how he can say that Afghanistan seems to be being rebuilt. It seems to me that every area outside of Kabul is being taken back by warlords and people that used to run separate areas. What's being done outside of Kabul itself?
That's simply not the case. And I've been to Afghanistan twice in the last 6 months.
Have you been outside Kabul?
There is an enormous amount of progress. I have been outside Kabul, yes. And there is progress. I'm not pretending, and no one should pretend. No one should pretend. Nobody should pretend that this is going to be resolved overnight.
None.
An enormous amount of effort is being made. And I mean, seriously, just over 12 months ago, the regime in Afghanistan allowed that country to be used to train the people who brought such death and destruction to the United States. Now there is a government there seeking to try and restore that country as part of the international community, seeking eventually to have democratic elections. That's an enormous progress. It's a progress that's been brought about by the international community and above all else by the United States.
And you know, as the only woman on this panel, I would like to point out the horrendous treatment of women under the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda people. I cannot imagine that the women in at least Kabul are not better off today than they were a year ago, not being allowed to have education. Of course, Michael, I would love for you to criticize the old government and how they treated women, but you just criticized the United States government.
I criticize the things I'm responsible for first. That's true. It's just the way I was raised.
You're not responsible for the United States government, but I would like to see your criticism. I'd like to see your criticism here at governments who treat children, as the Secretary just pointed out, in the way that Saddam Hussein gives no money to children.
Baby milk, right?
And yes,
baby
I would.
Milk story. I
would like for you to criticize the Afghan government that treated women as if they were not even persons.
Can I remind you when you were in the Reagan administration, correct? Right?
Yes.
And
I was also Barry Goldwater's chief counsel. I'm an old-time Republican.
Okay. I have to digest that one. Your administration sent up to Capitol Hill a little Kuwaiti girl that testified in front of Congress, telling the story about how the Iraqis had come into Kuwait and came into the hospitals and took the babies out of the incubator and put the babies on the cold floor. And then it turned out
that was the Bush administration. You got to get your history right.
Reagan, Bush.
Right.
All right. It's the same cabal as far as I'm concerned. Anyways, you understand that this little girl testified, and it turned out that she was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador. That it was all a lie. It was all made up to get us to go into the Gulf War. Just like Colin Powell saying that there were 500,000 Iraqi troops ready to invade Saudi Arabia. It then turns out that there were 180,000, far less than what he said. All these things to sort of juice up the lie.
Were you against the invasion of Kuwait?
By which country?
By the United States and the Allies that did it?
I'm against the invasion of any country.
Yeah, were you against the invasion?
Any country.
Sorry, were you against the invasion of Kuwait? It's a simple question. By the Allies, after you were. Iraq should have been left there.
They weren't going to be left there.
What was going to happen?
What was going to happen? Yeah.
Well, I don't know what was going to happen. I guess we never found out, did we?
Well, we know that when they destroyed every aspect of Kuwait.
Our job was to reinstate the dictator of Kuwait, which we succeeded in doing. Those people are no more free today in Kuwait.
So you would have
You talk about women's rights.
Iraq occupy Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, right?
No, of course not. You know that. Everyone on this panel and everyone in this audience agrees that Saddam Hussein is a bad guy. And everyone agrees that whoever committed the mass murder here in New York should be tried and punished. We all agree on that, okay? So don't get down that.
How about that person that is a threat to the United States, who has used poison gas, who has used biological weapons, who we believe, what difference does it make? What difference does it make? Who
believes, just shout to get your point made.
We believe that he is on the verge of nuclear weaponry, and you think we should leave him alone?
I think that's a lie. I think it's a Bush lie.
All right. Well, we've got a disagreement that we aren't going to resolve, and we only have, in my judgment, somewhere like 15 or 12 minutes to go, and I want to move on to another question. From Samir Arora, please. Samir Arora. Yeah.
Is there a special relationship between the United States and Britain, or is that just a convenient way of Britain to feel globally important?
What's your view?
Well, I don't know. It comes to what has the United States done for Britain in the recent past?
Jeff Hoon, do we just...
I think there is a very special relationship, and I think it was demonstrated graphically on the afternoon, as it was in the United Kingdom, of September the 11th a year ago. And what you had there was not a calculation